Hi everybody, so I'm Michael. Actually did my MBA back 3 years ago at Nyenrode University. And for this session, I'll be introducing 5 books that actually, changed the lens of not just an MBA student for me at the time, but also just the perspective that I have on life. And I'd like to share that with you guys. I'm from Jamaica, a very small island. So you could imagine growing up as a kid, like there's not a lot of, let's say, yeah, global resources that's actually available. So what I found the solitude in reading is actually tapping into the brains of, let's say, a Napoleon or an Albert Einstein, for instance. So you do see life from a different perspective as an island kid, so to say. And I think it actually pushed me to understand that there's a bit more to the impact that you can actually make on the world. So I think that's the key thing for me on reading. The first book that I'll be introducing is actually something that is really dear to me. It's called the Peloponnesian War. I think one thing that people don't really understand is that history always repeats itself. And I think for an MBA student, it's actually good to tap into what history actually means and what history actually has done, because a lot of these decisions that we're making today in this modern time, they have been made before. For instance, Pericles in this book had to debate an entire nation to basically not go to war, for instance. And you see, themes coming out from diplomacy, you see themes coming out from critical thinking, and you see themes coming out from just dealing with people who aren't on your side, for instance, and selling a story. And I think this is actually quite critical for any MBA student, just to understand the role that history could play in their life. And I think this book touched that quite well in terms of like understanding that dynamics. The other one is actually going more on the, let's say, Asian, Eastern philosophy. It's a book that's really dear to me. It's from Confucius. It's the Analects. You could also imagine, again, from like, one thing that I really like from understanding books is there's 3 core things that you can actually think about when you're reading any book, philosophy or history or psychology. Is these 3 elements. Is okay, well, who am I and how do I actually project this agent in the world? And that's okay, well, you need to talk to other people, and then you're also playing in this arena. And I think what Confucius pretty much does is he takes you to that journey in terms of understanding, okay, well, this is the person that you should be in terms of being a good person, so to say. He also shows you how to engage with people in a very civil, a very harmonious way. And I think he also shows you in a very ethical way in terms of, okay, well, you're living in this arena, the earth, you should protect it. Because if you want to create a legacy, then protecting the earth, climate change, these topics actually come in play. And this book is written ages ago, but it's so relevant. So it's one that I definitely recommend for any MBA student. And that's number 4. The other one is actually, a bit more modern, so to say. It's Ayn Rand. I think every Steve Jobs or a lot of these major thinkers of our modern time actually recommends this book. And it's one that I was a bit iffy to put on the list because it is well read. But I read back through the first 2 chapters last night, and I was like, it really needs to be there, because again, when we just talked about like this agency, the role that you play, who you are, how do you relate to this other people, and how do you relate to the environment or the arena that you're playing in. I think this book touches it really well. It's also saying that you should actually be very innovative. You should actually be creative. You should push that onto the world, because that's how development goes through. That's how growth actually takes place. So don't be, I would say, bad. Don't think bad that you're actually projecting good things into the world, but do it in a very good way. Is pretty much what this book is saying. That's number 3. I'm a big fan of biographies. In fact, I think my favorite type of book are moral biographies. It's pretty much a biography of a person who you basically get into a bit more into their mind. You get a bit more into their conflicts. You get a bit more into their decision-making process. And I really love these books. But I could only recommend one. So one of my favorite actually is from Leonardo da Vinci. It's actually written by Walter Isaacson. I think the reason why I really love this book is because it's so profound, because Leonardo da Vinci is one of those early innovators. I mean, for an MBA student, you really want to tap into that forefront of being innovative, right? You want to lead companies to be innovative. And I think that the core message from Da Vinci is that he was really curious, very multidisciplinary. I think multidisciplinary thing is actually the key thing, where you can actually draw into this creative process of, okay, well, there's physics, there's chemistry, there's biology. But if you read so wide and you understand all these topics, you can actually null it into art or innovation, so to say. And I find that really beautiful. So even for me as a person, through my MBA, I took up like books on, let's say, physics or quantum theory, just to basically understand, just different topics. Because when it comes back to solving a problem in a very unique case, in a business case, or talking to people, then you basically tap into these this wide variety of topics that can actually pull to cobble together what you're actually trying to create for the world. So yeah, 100% recommend this book. The last book, and actually my favorite book in the world, is one by Marcus Aurelius. It's called Meditations. I don't have a copy now, but it's the most read book that I've read. I try to read it at least 3 times a year. And it's the most book that I've given. So I just gave my last copy to a friend of mine when I visited him in Switzerland. So don't have the copy, but I think it's again, based on the fact that these books tap into this, who you are, how do you project yourself in this world, and what arena do you play in. I think it's a very personal book, because it's a book that's actually not meant to be a book. It was a book that was just written as a diary from the Emperor of Rome at the time, Marcus Aurelius. And it was his personal thoughts, and he was known to be a Stoic. So a Stoic person is pretty much someone who, on contrary, people think they're stone, like stone heart, so to say. But I think Stoics are a bit more, just rational people who project themselves in this world that, okay, well, if I can't control something, then I won't act on it. So I'll only act on the things that I can control. And I think that's a very small message for a Stoic, but I think Marcus Aurelius basically projects that in a very palatable way. And again, this book is written ages ago. And just to understand that the struggles that he had at the time is actually still quite prevalent for modern day context. So the number one book then would be Meditations, by Marcus Aurelius. Those are the 5 books that I would highly recommend to an MBA student. And again, these are not an exhaustive list. It's just a very packaged list in terms of, okay, well, where do you start to understand, again, those 3 categories that I mentioned, who are you, how do you project yourself, and that arena. And I think these 5 books covers that in a very holistic way, that you can actually start to embrace your own journey in terms of, maybe you want to read something like the lives of the Caesars, going in a bit more into Rome, or maybe you want to read the lives of the artists, because you think more about creativity. I think, again, this sets the foundation for further books to read. For business students, you actually have these very typical business books, but I think they're so constrained in this business context that you basically, if you want to solve problems, you're basically solving a problem that's not very unique, if that makes, or maybe the problem is unique, but the solutions are still very not unique. And I think if you go out a bit wide into history, into philosophy, into psychology even, you tap a bit more into what this broader perspective means for these problems that you're solving. So I can't stress it more. I think it's done a wonder for me in terms of just opening my eyes into what this world is. Again, who am I? It's a big question for any MBA student. Like, we're always given these paths, so to say, like a very default path, they call it. But these book basically shows you, hey, there's actually other alternative options that you can actually pursue. There's other you-ness that you can actually pursue, and not just a template that someone says, you need to work for a McKinsey, or you need to work for a Deloitte. There are other paths, and I think these book basically gives you that perspective to be comfortable to make these very difficult decisions, even when your career is on the line, even when there's a key decision being made for let's say a company. I think these books give you that rudimentary foundation to make these decisions without flinching, so to say. So. Initially, when I was halfway, I started my MBA, I actually wanted to work for consulting company, or actually more private equity or venture capital, well, private equity at the time. And I think halfway through my MBA, reading these books and just regurgitating the fact that, okay, who am I and what part do I want to play in this society? I think those two first things actually dawned on me, and it was more like a mid-20s crisis, so to say. Thinking, okay, well, yeah, society says if you want to be successful, you go these paths, right? And I think when I was halfway through, I was like, okay, well, yeah, maybe there are other paths, and I started exploring those other paths. One thing that kept really vivid for me was working as a part-time at this venture capital firm. It was a small firm, it's a student fund, and we basically invest in like startups that are very young startups, so to say. And during that time, it was a big eye-opener, like, okay, well, here's probably an alternative path in going into this tech startup realm. And that's what I've been doing for the past 3.5 years, which is working in tech. So I'm a product manager at a tech company. And again, this world is sometimes very chaotic. And again, these books actually gives you that foundation to again make decisions in a very critical way. If you asked me 4 years ago when I was about to start an MBA, like, would you be working in tech? Would you be doing something that is very unconventional? I would say definitely no. So yeah, there goes my answer. I hope it tackles the exact question.